I'm ready, Rod.
All right. Good. Hello, Gerard.
Hi, Rod.
How's things?
Yeah, it's all good. Thanks, you.
Good. Thank you.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice to see you. So we're here today to talk about race,
Mm-hmm.
the notion of race.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Race and racism. So I know you feel quite strongly about it. It's certainly in
Yeah.
America.
Yeah.
Go ahead. What do you?
Well,
What are your thoughts?
it's a very prominent topic
Mm-hmm.
in the public discourse today,
Yeah.
and it's I think we're entering into a new era, frankly,
Mm.
of race relations. In that I don't think white people can count very much longer being in like the unchecked power.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
In America or in the world or both?
both.
Mm.
America's a tough one though because there's a very strong culture here of conservative um, this is our land.
Yeah.
And so there's no way to. I mean, I know what maybe tonight will or this morning for you, but you know we'll float a few ideas that might seem um, that they probably would not agree with on that side.
Yes. Well, it certainly is.
And there's no way, as far as I'm aware, there's no way to convince them.
No, but
There's nothing you can say or do.
it's not their land, is it?
No,
I mean, the natives were
I'm going to
there
say straight up
first,
no.
and they
You know,
would say nobody owns the land. I suppose.
that might be better. Well, that's one of the ideas that's coming under attack right now. Is the whole entire notion of private ownership, right? Which our
Mhm.
whole system is based on,
Mm.
is being called out. Actually, maybe there's a better way. That's what a certain perspective is saying in the public discourse now, right?
No private ownership.
Well, they're not saying it explicitly like that, but it's just this idea that yeah, we need to have a more democratic, socialistic economy that shares and redistribution is good, so that nobody ever has to, live in extreme poverty or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's redistributing wealth. There's still some component of private ownership in it, I suppose, um, but I do think that ultimately the whole idea of private ownership is coming under scrutiny, I think, as a
Yes.
whole. And is this the best way to organize a society, this whole private ownership? Now in many ways it works, right? It definitely works. but um but is it the only way? you know so
Mm.
right. Anyway, we're talking about race.
Yeah.
How does this relate to race, right? What I just said about the
Well, probably white people own most of the land, but yeah.
exactly, it's all about the
Mm.
ownership, right?
Hmm.
And the wealth.
Yeah.
I mean, it's no accident that all the wealthiest people in the world are white.
Hmm.
Maybe there's like one Chinese guy or something, but it's like you know, it's like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and the Google guys and you know, so that is not that's not an accident, right? And I mean that is
If it's not an accident, what caused it for all these white people to be the richest?
a a certain narrative of supremacy.
Mm. White supremacy.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, yeah. I mean, some people don't even believe in it. Do you believe in white supremacy as a legitimate ideology, I suppose?
I don't believe in it. I believe that some
Right.
people
No, I know.
believe in it.
No, I don't mean believe in it as I'm a supporter. I mean believe that that's actually how the world is governed. That's the question. Do you believe that that is the governing force in the world or not? That's a central question. I think that we're talking about here, right? Because, well, never mind. Just yeah.
Yeah. I wouldn't like to believe it. I mean, I could certainly see that it's possibly true. Certainly, when you look at, as you say, all the wealth is with the white people in the West, and black and brown people are poorer, and 9 million die from hunger every year, then you could see that it's certainly a possibility that white
Yes.
supremacy is still alive and well.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's certainly a possibility.
Yeah.
And it's funny for me. This has not been my line of thinking for very long.
Mm.
It's only been recently that I've really come to kind of see that the extreme far left, like it's actually true what they're saying. like there's something true in it, right? Like I don't like their tactics. I don't like what they propose in terms of solutions very much, but in terms of kind of reading the situation, I think it's pretty accurate actually, right? That it's no mistake also that the West is rich, right? And and then at the very, very bottom, you have sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah.
That's not just the poorest, but also the most robbed. You know what I mean? Like that's where everything we have, comes from there. All these rare earth materials down there, right? So our whole way of life depends on that kind of theft.
I heard that companies on the London Stock Exchange own $100 trillion of resources of Africa currently.
$100 trillion.
Yes. And British companies own 4 times the size of the UK of land in Africa. So it's like colonialism continues in other guises. Yeah.
Except there's one more partner, China, who's now in the imperialization game with Africa, right? They're doing the same thing, except they're creating an illusion more of a partnership where, because they are doing legitimate, projects of infrastructure and stuff. The One Belt Road Initiative. Is that what it's called? The Belt and Road Initiative.
Belt and Road. Yeah.
And Africa is a central, a pillar of that, right? Of this one belt that they're trying to build, this one road.
Yeah.
All roads lead to China. That's what they're trying to. They're doing it consciously, explicitly. So, yeah. So that's the thing. The whole world's system depends on that continuing, right? I mean, we couldn't continue our way of life without making sure that those resources never get interrupted, and that means making sure that people who live there are no problem at all. And you do that by just you just keep everybody extremely poor, and you have very bad leaders who
corruption,
who grift everything, right? So and they're the partners of the West. Like these very bad leaders are actually what we need. We install them, right, to make sure that this way of life it continues, because we got to keep our eye on the stock market. Right?
Yeah. I mean, it's very sad if it is true. It's not a worldview I like to believe in.
You're right.
But because
it's
so horrible, isn't it, to purposely keep countries down for.
Oh yeah, but that's what. But the whole idea of white imperialization has been making sure other people are held down. Like it's not just a side effect that just happened. It was a crucial central tenet of.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it was explicit in history, and we can see it. It's just now colonialization is not so clear, and so you hope that we've moved on from it.
Right.
But,
But
It looks
becoming
like we have.
unconscious of it didn't work, right? You and I think, were born in a generation where we lived most of our lives never really having to think about any of this stuff, right? I mean, I didn't think very much about it. I mean, I did a lot. I mean, I thought about it in certain ways, but to feel that, you know, the whole structure is being challenged at its foundations, such as in
Mm,
private ownership. That's just one thing, right? But there's other
yeah,
things that are, are being questioned
yeah.
by people who are not white, who are saying, why should we partake in any of your systems that have been so purposely harmful to us and have never been? I mean, yeah, I mean, some people have made it or whatever, like it's gotten better, but
Mm.
I'm just, portraying a certain side of the view, right? Of what we're talking about.
Systems such as capitalism.
Yeah, you
Mm,
know, but the way this particular capitalistic system is set up is that,
yeah,
you know, white people control it completely, right?
yeah.
And now it is worth saying that this has only been a very new, right? Like white domination of the earth is actually it's like a blink in the eye of even
Mm,
human history.
yeah.
Like we're talking about hundreds of years only, right?
Hmm.
And so how
1492, I
deep are
believe,
the
is the date.
foundations of it really? How deep are the foundations of it really? Yes, 1492. Exactly.
Columbus.
Yeah.
Yes, the genocide of the
But
natives
before
in the
that,
Americas.
the Portuguese had already started the African slave trade.
Mm,
So that happened earlier in the 15th century.
okay, but yes, the fact that Europe was actually behind
Hmm.
the rest of the world at that time,
Yes.
and they only became the dominant force through extermination of the people, taking of the silver and the gold, and then of course the Atlantic slave trade. Yeah. And then, I mean, this is a lot of this is coming from Kehinde Andrews. You've seen him,
Hmm.
Rod,
Yeah.
and he mentioned the Enlightenment, that because of course Europe then became dominant. From what I just said, that they
Yes.
put that into the theory that okay, it must be that whites are superior, and that I suppose is held ever since, isn't it?
Yes.
And that the Industrial Revolution was about Protestant work ethic
Yes. Exactly.
rather than built on the Atlantic slave trade. Yeah.
Exactly. And built on the subjugation of everybody we ever came into contact with.
Yes, and that it's not taught as
Not
history,
like
and
that.
politicians don't mention it, because if they did, we'd have to actually, address the issues of today. Yeah.
Exactly. But in
Mm.
my opinion, I would like to be the generation that can, you know, try to cease it. You know, I don't
Yeah.
mean stop it. Like it's going to be around a long time, way beyond our lifetime. But I mean, racism. It's going to take a couple more generations, I would imagine, right? Of you know, but yeah, people like Kahindi Andrews really do make a certain kind of sense, don't they? Like when you look at it from that angle, it's like, oh, okay,
Mm.
like because what we're taught as Americans, anyway,
Yeah.
when I was growing up, I mean, there was unquestionably America was the greatest country in the world,
Mm.
and we were the pioneers and the spearhead of you know of world history, which is actually true right now. But it doesn't it isn't true because there's a certain there's a superiority. It's true because, well, I have a theory why.
Go on.
Yeah, I mean, have you thought about why it was Europeans that ended up being the global colonizers?
Well, I believe religion was one factor. They well, certainly with the Spanish, they felt that it was God's will
Yeah.
to dominate and to take all this gold and silver they did from the New World.
Yep.
But go on. Any other reasons why it was?
Well, I saw a really short YouTube video not that long ago, and it was only 5 minutes long, and it changed my whole view actually of the whole entire thing. Some historian from Caltech, I forget his name, but he made a case that the reason Europeans were successful at subjugating everybody else, right? Literally everybody else. Do you think that's true? Like, is it true to say that we have subjugated literally everybody else?
I don't know. Africa is certainly a place that was subjugated. Almost every country, right? Every single country. I don't know about the rest of the world, but yeah.
Well, what about Northern Africa, like Egypt, and would you consider Egypt subjugated?
I don't know the history, but we
I don't.
We had the Suez Canal, didn't we? British for a long time. So I'd imagine we had the wealth and from that part of the world.
In those days, we were like the Chinese, building infrastructure, right? And which made our partners like us, right? So it gave incentive to build some kind of a partnership, right? Where locals would come on board with the white agenda, right?
Yeah.
And execute our will, essentially, right? Yes. So now I know that what we're saying, is not, I don't hear what we're saying very often, right?
No, well, you wouldn't, I suppose.
No.
If people want to keep the
current view of the current white person, right, that I'm saying right now.
No.
You're saying too. And I think thank you for introducing me to Kehinde Andrews. I mean, I had already come to some of those conclusions, but he clarified things that I was like, wow, holy cow. It's very, very hard to argue back, right? He makes a very compelling case, I think.
Yeah, and the institutions like the World Bank and the IMF are all complicit. Again, it's not a view I like to hear, because I don't like to believe that these institutions that are supposed to be helping and just keeping.
But it just keeps everybody down even further. Yeah, because we're in charge of it all. There's no such thing as a partnership with America, right? I mean, there's no such thing. Not a true partnership. There's junior partners. I'm not saying this as like, oh, I'm so patriotic, this is great. Like, I'm saying, like, this is just it feels that way to me as a statement of fact. It is changing. I think our status is reducing. As the years go by, and China's definitely ascending, right? So that's going to be, I think China represents the future, actually. I think ultimately the West is going to fail. Not the West. No, I'm sorry. I take that back. The West is not going to fail. Ultimately, America is going to fail.
America is going to fail.
Yeah, I believe America is going to fail. Yeah.
Sorry, coming back to this video you watched.
Oh, yes.
You asked me, did I believe every country was subjugated by the West?
Yeah. Or our proxy, right?
Or a proxy. Every country in the world.
Our will has been the dominant force, right? The will of whoever is in Washington, or at any given time, who have been predominantly white until recently, and now there are changes happening now, and the spectrum is definitely becoming a lot more colored, even at the top, right? In politics and in Congress, and it's much more diverse than it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
But this guy at Caltech, okay, this
Yeah.
historian, his idea is this: 1,000 years ago. Oh, by the way, are you keeping time?
Yeah. It's 9:41 at my
No,
time.
I
So
mean, how many minutes?
yeah, probably about 20.
Okay. Oh, wow. All right. So he says, if you go back 1,000 years in European history,
Mm.
it's the middle of, it's the Dark Ages, right? And it's the Middle
Yeah.
Ages, and there's no institutions, right? And white people are essentially, I don't mean white people, but the Europeans that are living there, because people didn't think in terms of race until recently.
Mhm.
Even
Mhm.
if you read like ancient accounts, you don't hear race ever. It's cultural differences for sure, but and they might notice a difference in color of skin, but there's no judgment based on that fact at all.
Not a racial hierarchy, which
No,
was
not in terms of skin color. The hierarchy, there was hierarchies of different kinds, different sets of principles, but the color of skin was not one of them.
because that's what, of course, made colonialism and slavery easier. Is that
Exactly.
they were subhuman, weren't they? People
Totally.
of other color.
And so easy to identify, right? Like it automatically you're this, at
Yeah.
first sight, you are this,
Okay, so that's a new thing. I mean,
Sure. But this guy from Caltech says 1,000 years ago, we were basically barbarians, right? There are really no institutions except the church.
mhm.
And we had warlords. It was just competing warlords all over Europe, right? And there was constant warfare. And that's where we get like the chivalry kind of the culture from, right? They were always fighting, they were in these knights, right? They were always at war. Okay.
Mhm.
And kings were always going to war with each other all over Europe. And his theory is that he did a really big comparative analysis of other areas of the world in those days, 1,000 years ago. And he shows you that there was much more advancement in places like China and the Aztecs, right? So technological and building a good society was something that had still evaded Europe, right? I mean, Rome worked for a good long while, right? But then it just fell into total disarray for a long time, and
Yes.
who knows what life was. I mean, there's not a lot of records of back then. But so his idea is that because of those circumstances, we became so good at war. I mean, to the point where it was our entire culture, where war was everything. Everything depended on war. So he does these comparative analyses where he says that Louis the 14th or the 16th, the one that built Versailles. Do you know which one that was? You're the historian.
Well, I did study history, not French. I go Louis the 14th. The
Yeah,
son.
I think that seems to be right to me too. But maybe it's the 16th. He said that building the Palace of Versailles only took 2% of the national tax revenue. And he spent the other 98% on war. He did a comparative, so he shows you like in China, they also had military and they also had war, but it was only one component of other things, right? Whereas for us, it became everything, right?
Yeah.
And so our whole way of thinking became extremely competitive and extremely
militaristic,
and we're gonna and hostile and aggressive, and we value valor and bravery and yeah. So I think that's a pretty good that's a pretty good starting point, and he alludes to Guns, Germs, and Steel by by Jared Diamond,
Mhm.
right? And he thinks that a lot of that is correct too.
Mm.
He thinks, but he believes that the central thing was that we became the best at war. Every time
Yeah.
we encountered other people, we could beat them because we were so good at war.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and we developed gunpowder beyond any other place too. So it was discovered in China, right? They were the first ones to, but the Europeans pushed that technology way beyond what the Chinese ever did with it, right?
Mm.
So that created weapons that were so superior
Oh,
with the most hostile and aggressive people whose very culture is dependent on that, right?
yeah. Mhm.
And and that's what you get. And they started turning outward, and everywhere we went, it was just,
Yeah.
So that's his theory. I think it's a pretty good one,
Yes. Compelling
Yeah.
argument.
Yeah. The Caltech. What was his name? His name is, I think Hoffman was his last name. Hoffman.
Okay.
Yeah. hmm So yeah. So that's that. Right. But we still haven't even really gotten to race, have we?
Well, the history of white supremacy.
Yes.
And
It
yeah, that's
begins
what.
with, according to one writer who, I started to read this book here, The History of White People
Mhm.
by Nell Irvin Painter. Have you heard of this book?
I have not.
Yeah. She's amazing. I mean, she writes a very, very compelling story. It starts in Greece.
Mhm.
The Greeks had a superiority complex, right?
Mhm.
They were the pioneers of science and the pioneers of, mathematics.
Mhm.
Maybe not the only pioneers, of course, but they were the, you know, these were we get Plato and, all these other people. Well, Greece was a complete, absolute slave state, right? I mean, it was a complete slave state, right?
Mm.
And so this idea of having to figure out a way to justify subjugating others, she thinks begins with the Greeks. It just wasn't based on skin color at that time,
Mhm.
because the Greeks thought white people who were, whiter than them, the Gauls and the Celtics, right? They thought they were inferior.
Okay.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. But the mindset of superiority and subjugating others, and then building this glorious, civilization, that, right?
Mm.
Could it have happened without the slavery? Is the question, right? Could America have become what it became if it hadn't been for the fact of slavery?
Well, no, absolutely not. No, you would think.
Well,
Of
some would
course,
argue, but some people
slavery
would
has.
argue that
Some
slavery.
people would argue. Yeah.
Yeah, some people would argue that the entire Southern agrarian economy was, just one factor of a much larger economy in the United States, and without that, it still would have been possible to have done it.
Mhm.
I don't agree actually with that perspective myself, but
No, but some do. Yeah.
but well, I mean, you could numerically make that case, right?
Mhm.
It's just that you have to think there's more to it than just numbers, right? Or how much money was earned through slavery. It's beyond that. The cultural impact also affects economic things too, right? And so um, the spillover of it is just all over the USA.
Yeah.
But you were saying, I didn't mean to.
Oh no, slavery has been part of many different civilizations, isn't it? Not just white.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, everywhere. I mean, everywhere you look, there was slavery.
But not based on race. That's I think the big difference.
Not based on race.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's wrap this one up today,
Okay.
and then maybe next time we can discuss, racism today, what it looks like, and
Sounds good.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a good plan. Yeah, it's good. Stop with the Greeks and go on to the Americans.
Enough of the Greeks.
Get on to the Brits and the Americans, for Christ's sake.
Mm.
All right.
Okay. Good. Thank
Here,
you.
let me. I'll stop the video here.